As the Honorary Colonel of the Ayrshire Yeomanry Squadron of the Scottish and North Irish Yeomanry, one of my responsibilities is to maintain continuity in matters of history and tradition. I take this responsibility seriously because I realise that it is very difficult to build upon success that is unrecognised. And in the Ayrshire Yeomanry we have over 2 centuries of distinguished service to be remembered and recognised. In this short film, I aim to show the members of the serving squadron where their predecessors fought during the Second World War and what they achieved there. To give them confidence that, as they go forward to write the future story of the Scottish and North Irish Yeomanry, they have a strong foundation to build upon. Let's begin by reminding ourselves that the Ayrshire Yeomanry has served with distinction in different roles under different regimental cap badges. As a regiment in its own right, we wore our distinctive Griffin cap badge, which is the crest of the Earls of Carricks. This honour is accorded to the monarch's eldest son, so our current Earl is Prince William, the Prince of Wales. The badge comprises the lion's head, denoting as strong as a lion, the eagle's wings, denoting as swift as an eagle, and the 27 feathers in the wings claim our mastery over the 27 counties of Scotland. Under this cap badge from 1793 to 1971, Ayrshire yeomen served as horsed cavalry, mounted rifles, camel-mounted cavalry, infantry, field artillery, armoured and armoured reconnaissance, and even, for a brief spell, as logisticians. Our predecessors proved enthusiastic and adaptable. From 1972 to 1992, and again from 1999 to 2014, we were the leading squadron in the Queen's Own Yeomanry, a medium armoured reconnaissance regiment equipped with the CVRW and T series of light armoured vehicles. We served as a formed unit for the whole of the Cold War and then supported the regular army by deploying individual soldiers to conflicts in Eastern Europe, the Middle East and Afghanistan. From 1992 to 1999, we formed the nucleus of a new Home Defence Reconnaissance Regiment for Scotland, with squadrons in Ayr, Edinburgh, Cooper and East Kilbride. And since 2014, we have served as a light cavalry squadron in the Wolf Pack, that is the Scottish and North Irish Yeomanry, part of the modern reserves. We are the senior Scottish Yeomanry unit and the only one with an unbroken record of service to Crown and country. The best way to understand the nature of the Ayrshire Yeomanry before 1939 is to think of Michael Morpurgo's wonderful story Warhorse, in which a farm horse and his young owner served together during the First World War. The yeomanry was horsed cavalry, and to a great extent the horses belonged to our officers and soldiers. But all of this began to change when, on the 11th of September 1939, the regiment received this mobilisation telegram, in response to which the full regimental strength of 240 all ranks reported to their drill halls in Ayr, Cumnock, Kilmarnock and Beath, 120 of them bringing their own horses. And this is how they looked in 1939. On the left we have the fresh-faced trooper David Smith from Ayr, and on the right a number of officers taking their ease in a break in mounted training on Ayr Racecourse. Everyone here served with distinction throughout the Second World War and was fortunate enough to return home safely to Ayrshire. From the point of view of continuity, I should highlight that Major David Gregg, with the cigarette in the centre of the picture, was my first honorary colonel, and Major Knox on the extreme right was well known to our old comrades as Colonel Sir Bryce Knox, both as our honorary colonel and Lord Lieutenant of Ayrshire. Let's now watch a Pathé newsreel to see the Ayrshire Yeomanry training on Ayr Beach during the winter of 1939.
Despite the ultra-mechanization of modern armies, there is evidently still some use for the horse. And here upon a beach in Scotland, the Lancashire Yeomanry are putting recruits through a course of training, not only with the horse, but also with machine guns. Part of the training is in quick dispersal on the approach of a raiding warplane, a thrilling picture of quick-fire action. Has passed on, and the Yeomanry resume their ordinary exercises with a breathless charge.
Fun though this was, it was clear that we could not enter a modern mechanised war in this fashion. So in December 1939, the War Office gave us 4 options for change. We could remain as cavalry, but provide trained remounts for regular regiments, or we could join the Royal Artillery as a regiment in our own right, and train to be either heavy, anti-tank or field gunners. The decision was made by a show of hands in the officers' mess, and was inspired, I would imagine, by those celebrated field gunners of the Royal Horse Artillery that we still see today at ceremonial events. The role of field artillery was to provide highly mobile and accurate fire support to armoured regiments and mechanised infantry. This decision was to have far-reaching consequences. The first consequence was that the regiment was divided to form 2 field artillery regiments, each pursuing its own distinguished path to VE Day on 8th of May 1945. Their separate histories were set down immediately after the war by officers who had served throughout. These accounts were later compiled into a fuller history of the regiment's first 170 years, entitled The Proud Trooper. All of these books are available to purchase through the Squadron PRI. The conversion to Royal Artillery explains why a 25-pounder gun howitzer stands today on a plinth outside Yeomanry House, and why a cement plaque summarises our entire contribution to the defeat of Germany with the words North Africa, Italy, and Northwest Europe. But, as we will learn, that contribution was significant, and victory in Europe was hard won. Throughout the war service of the 2 regiments, our main armament remained the same. It took us some time to get it, but when we had it, we mastered its ability to deliver highly accurate indirect fire out to 12.25 kilometres, and direct fire, usually against armour, at ranges as close as 100 metres. The 25-pounder fired 3 types of round, but most use was made of high explosive to destroy the enemy, and smoke to mask the movement of friendly forces. The gun was towed by a tough and reliable quad artillery tractor, and in the middle ran a limber containing 24 ready rounds of ammunition. The quad was also home to the gun crew of 6. The organisation of a Royal Artillery field regiment was based on 3 gun batteries, each with 8 guns. Junior officers and soldiers tended to serve the guns, and senior officers went ahead with the forward troops of their division. To enable them to do this, we mastered a wide range of ever more modern equipment during the course of the war, including 4 kinds of OP tank, half-tracks and carriers. In addition, vital work surveying gun positions and laying communications links was conducted in the middle of the battlefield by yeomen in jeeps with only small arms to defend them. The wartime strength of each regiment was nearly 700 men of all ranks, so almost 3 years from 1940 to 1942 was invested in force generation and training. During that time, the Ayrshire Yeomanry expanded from 240 to 1,400 yeomen drawn from all over the United Kingdom. The first regiment to deploy on war operations was 152 Field Regiment, who joined the 6th Armoured Division, whose instantly recognisable badge was the mailed fist. They deployed in company with more than 30 famous regular and reserve regiments, including the Lothians and Border Horse, who were in tanks then, and today serve as E Squadron of the Scottish and North Irish Yeomanry. On Saturday the 14th of November 1942, the regiment sailed from Greenock as part of Operation Torch, the plan to land a combined British and American First Army on a mission to defeat the Germans, Italians and Vichy French in North Africa. 1 week later, the regiment disembarked at Algiers in heavy rain and under Luftwaffe bombing attacks. The terrain was muddy, the weather was cold and wet, not how anyone had imagined Africa would be. More importantly, they now faced a significant threat in the shape of the German Afrika Korps, a highly experienced mechanized fighting force, well supported with tactical air and ably led by General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. The Afrika Korps had fought a running battle with the British 8th Army backwards and forwards along the North African coast since 1941. At this point in the war, the 8th Army under Montgomery had the advantage and was pushing German forces west into Tunisia. The role of the First Army, and within it the Ayrshire Yeomanry, was to attack from Algeria in the west and close the pincers on the Afrika Korps. The regiment first went into action at Bouarada and formed a partnership with the Grenadier Guards, which was to stand both regiments in good stead in the battles of the next 3 years. On 20th of February 1943, the Afrika Korps attacked the inexperienced American troops guarding the Kasserine Pass and very nearly succeeded in breaking through to the Allied rear. The Ayrshire Yeomanry were part of a force that was rushed to the head of the pass to form a block and then to pursue the Afrika Korps as they withdrew. Subsequently, the regiment was engaged in fierce fighting across the Gubalat plain, where it suffered many casualties, including the loss of its much respected commanding officer, Colonel Bill Bedford. The regiment then maintained overwatch as the Tunisian capital, Tunis, was liberated. And finally, 152 Ayrshire Yeomanry fought in the final actions of the campaign to trap the Afrika Korps at Cap Bon and then defeat them at Boufisha. Over 250,000 enemy soldiers went into captivity, and the war in North Africa had been won. Now, when I was growing up, we didn't have social media, but we did have comics. And one of those popular was The Victor, printed by D.C. Thompson of Dundee. This contained inspiring stories, and none were more inspiring than those that featured on the front and back covers. This Victor cover tells the story of how the Ayrshire Yeomanry at Bouarada fired smoke onto German positions in a way that caused the Luftwaffe's Stukas to bomb their own men. In the final scene, a 152 gunner exclaims, "This is how I like to fight a war, watching the Jerrys knocking each other to bits." In reality, however, the North African campaign was hard fought in difficult conditions against a dangerous enemy, but the 152 Ayrshire Yeomanry emerged from it as a battle-hardened field artillery regiment. Which was just as well, because in 1944 things didn't get any easier. The Ayrshire Yeomanry was left out of the order of battle for the invasion of Sicily and refitted to take part in the Italian campaign under the command of General Mark Clark of the US 5th Army. The Italian campaign was one of the most misrepresented of the Second World War. Back at home, the population formed the opinion that Allied forces in Italy were having a wonderful time in the sun, drinking wine and eating ice cream. As D-Day in Normandy approached, the media often referred to them as the D-Day Dodgers. But nothing could be further from the truth. For 15 months, they fought a continuous battle in very hostile terrain and harsh weather conditions against German forces who were experts in defensive warfare. 152 Ayrshire Yeomanry participated in every one of the major actions of that campaign, including 4 successive battles for Monte Cassino, breaking the Hitler line, where the North Irish Horse, who now serve as B Squadron of the Scottish and North Irish Yeomanry, won its most celebrated battle honour, breaking the Gothic line, the brutal struggle for Tossignano, and finally the crossing of the River Po. At Monte Cassino, the 4 battles obliterated the Benedictine monastery and the town beneath. In that town, sheltering in the cellars of the town jail, railway station, and in the crypt of a church, the senior officers of the Ayrshire Yeomanry provided intimate fire support to the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards, and the Welsh Guards. This was delivered by our batteries safely out of sight behind Monte Trocchio, with our OPs on top of the same feature. To give you an idea of the effort, one day alone, 16 guns of A and B battery fired over 8,300 rounds, with men like Gunner McGraw in constant action from dawn until 21:30 hours. 152 Ayrshire Yeomanry fired in the amphibious assault across the last major feature in northern Italy, the River Po. Just beforehand, in an action being highlighted in their second victor cover, their accurate fire destroyed a strong German force withdrawing on the last available ferry across the river. So, on the morning of VE Day, the Ayrshire Yeomanry crossed the border into Austria and, with their close friends and comrades of the Guards Brigade, came to rest in the village of Villach outside Klagenfurt. True to their origins, the first thing they did to decompress was to round up all the German army horses in the area and host a splendid gymkhana event. 6 months later, the regiment was disbanded. At this point in a cinema screening, one might reasonably expect to be offered an ice cream. However, instead, I would like to press on and share with you the other half of our regimental story. The 151 Ayrshire Yeomanry Field Regiment, who were destined for the Normandy landings and the drive into the black heart of Nazi Germany, to face down and defeat the most determined enemy on his home soil. They were fortunate to do this as part of the 11th Armoured Division, whose symbol was the Black Bull. So, for the 151 Ayrshire Yeomanry, the Second World War demanded 4 years of intensive all-arms training and a progressive build-up of gruelling exercises that knitted the 11th Armoured into one cohesive and formidable unit. Once again, the formation comprised over 30 famous regular and reserve regiments, including the Fife and Forfar Yeomanry, who were in tanks then and today serve as C Squadron of the Scottish and North Irish Yeomanry. As well as training, they endured more than their fair share of parades and inspections. These images come from a royal inspection by His Majesty King George VI and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth on the 22nd of March 1944 in Yorkshire. With only 3 months to go to D-Day, you can imagine that these yeomen were at their peak in terms of skills and fitness. Early in 1944, the 11th Armoured Division was told that they would serve as follow-on forces, to land immediately after D-Day with 3 possible tasks. 1, to join 7th Armoured Division in the chase for Falaise. 2, to concentrate on the bridgehead and prepare for the breakout. Or 3, if things hadn't gone well, to land and fight on the beaches. In the event, the D-Day landings were, as we now know, successful, and so the Ayrshire Yeomanry landed their 25-pounder guns and Sherman tanks on Roger sector of Sword Beach over the course of the 13th and 14th of June 1944. Field Marshal Montgomery's plan for Normandy used British and Canadian forces to pin down the most powerful German divisions, thus allowing the American army to swing right and then left in an encircling movement with Paris as its objective. The plan worked, but it put the 11th Armoured Division and the 151 Ayrshire Yeomanry up against 5 formidable panzer and infantry divisions, including the fanatical 12th SS Panzer Hitlerjugend Division. To put it mildly, these were not good people. They were brutal professional soldiers with good equipment and a level of operational independence at minor unit level that made them relentlessly effective opponents. From late June 151 Ayrshire Yeomanry was committed to 3 huge operations in succession that made it possible for the British Army to break out of the Normandy bridgehead and to liberate France, Belgium and the Netherlands by the end of 1944. The first was Operation Epsom, also known as the Battle of the Odon, intended to outflank the city of Caen. This involved crossing the Odon River and assaulting a dominating feature called Hill 112. The Yeomanry's guns first fired in support of the attack on the village of Sheux, pronounced Chooks by the yeomen, a bloody and confusing fight by 4 British divisions that is commemorated today in our Veterans Association's annual Sheux dinner. This was followed by Operation Goodwood, a huge armoured advance that cracked the German defences in early August, and then by Operation Bluecoat, in which the British fought their way out of the close country of the Normandy Bocage, hooking up with the Americans on our right flank and crossing the River Seine. As this map shows, the 11th Armoured Division then drove northeast hard to reach the Dutch port of Antwerp in just 6.5 days. Later, this advance came to be known as the Great Swan, but it was far from effortless. A typical action from that period was commemorated in yet another Victor comic cover. I'll read the true account from the proud trooper. It was in Bra that Captain Brett's OP tank was hit. All members of the crew, except for Gunner J. Prott, were badly wounded and burned. Having tried unsuccessfully to put out the fire, Prott helped the others out of the tank, and one man was inside when the turret blew up, stunning Prott for a while. When he recovered, he found a party of SS standing over them with automatics. They herded the crew into a burning building under guard. Prott dressed their wounds, and when the SS had departed, he went up on the roof to point out the positions of SS snipers to the advancing infantry of the 8th Rifle Brigade. They were swiftly dealt with, and Jock Prott was awarded the Military Medal for his coolness under fire. From August to November, 151 Ayrshire Yeomanry fought its way steadily northeast as part of the liberation of Holland. The year ended with the division dug in along the River Maas in wintry conditions, and at Christmas the division was able to celebrate its remarkable success with this jolly Christmas card. As the winter of 1944 turned into the spring of 1945, preparations were made for Operation Plunder, the huge airborne and amphibious assault to cross the Rhine and take the war into Germany. 151 Ayrshire Yeomanry lined up their guns wheel to wheel as part of the largest artillery park ever seen, and played their part in firing in the 51st Highland Division's crossing at Rees. They fired an average of 1,000 rounds per gun per day, maintaining a 24-gun salvo every 4 minutes for 3 days. 151 Ayrshire Yeomanry entered Germany on the 28th of March, crossing the Rhine on a 500-yard-long pontoon bridge at Wesel. From that point on, they were in country very familiar to the veterans of our Cold War generation, as northern Germany was where we exercised to confront the group of Soviet forces Germany. But in 1945, the regiment's advance crossed a series of well-defended river lines, the Weser, the Leine, the Aller, and eventually the Elbe, which we never reached in the Cold War because that would have taken us into East Germany. This advance took them into the German army's training areas around Paderborn, Soltau and Sennelager, where the Scottish and North Irish Yeomanry will in fact exercise in October 2025. Here, many hard actions were fought against German instructors and cadets. In April, a party of German officers crossed the River Aller to make a request. They said there was a refugee camp in which typhus was rife, and they asked the division to bypass it to prevent the spread of disease throughout the countryside. The request was rejected, and on the 15th of April, the division reached the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. British soldiers were totally unprepared for what they found there. Inside were approximately 55,000 emaciated and sick prisoners in desperate need of medical attention, Thousands of corpses in various stages of decomposition lay littered around the camp. Captain C.K.O. Spence of the Ayrshire Yeomanry was with the first group to enter the main gates. He wrote, "At the gate we found small groups of camp staff, including the infamous commandant, Kramer, and the head female guard, Irma Krause, pretending to be civilians. A few ragged figures had found their way into the space between the inner and outer wires. Seeing us, they rushed to the outer wire, and some of our men threw them cigarettes and sweets. They fell on them with ferocious energy, and when everything had been seized, some were left dead on the ground, torn to pieces by their comrades. The stench of death is still in my nostrils." After the horrors of Belsen, the 11th Armoured Division and 151 Ayrshire Yeomanry continued their advance northeast towards Lübeck on the Baltic coast. At the end of April, the regiment fired in the crossing of the River Elbe, and on the 1st of May it fired its last barrage of the war. 8 minutes of rapid fire fell on the village of Trittau, and 4 months later the inhabitants were still talking about the British artillery possessing automatic artillery guns. The German army was in full retreat, but their rearguards were still dangerous, and on the 2nd of May, gunner Jock Prott, now mounted in a Cromwell OP tank, was advancing with the 15th 19th Hussars when the vehicle was hit by a German bazooka or Panzerfaust. Jock dealt with the enemy by putting one track into the ditch where they were hiding and then drove his wounded crew to safety. He was later awarded well-deserved bar to his military medal. VE Day found the regiment halted at Kleine Gladbruck, German for Happy Little Bridge, and celebrating the end of the war in true Ayrshire Yeomanry fashion. There was much to be proud of and even more to be thankful for. 1 week later, the regiment moved to its final location in the pretty fishing harbour of Eckernförde, where it was to remain until February 1946, providing military government for the area, rounding up German soldiers and segregating members of the SS, and dealing with thousands of released slave workers. RHQ and the officers' mess were both established at the Seegarten Hotel, which still stands, and the first shirt dinner was held to mark the Odon River battle in Normandy. Gunner David Smith parked up his Cromwell OP tank and joined many of his comrades, competing on horseback and learning how to sail. David Smith returned to Ayr and took up his previous employment as a plumber with J.R. Smith & Sons in Cathcart Street in Ayr. He was on the reserve for a number of years but did not continue as a member of the Ayrshire Yeomanry, nor did he talk about his wartime experiences. But like many Ayrshire yeomen before him, he brought up sons who chose to serve in the regiment. Sergeant David Smith, who was tragically killed at Endex in Germany on the 6th of October 1982, and Sergeant Major Jim Smith, who served as a reservist throughout the Cold War period, and today is chairman of our Ayrshire Yeomanry Veterans Association. Turning to the regiment's roll of honour for the whole of the Second World War, the low level of fatal casualties may surprise you. This was partly as a result of the decision made in December 1939 to become field gunners, but mainly due to the expertise that developed in both the regiments and the way the yeomen took care of one another. Many yeomen were wounded, but a good number returned to regimental service. As we mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day, we will remember their collective contribution and their individual sacrifices. On the Ayrshire Yeomanry Guidon, or battle standard, the battle honour for the Second World War is brief, but I trust that you now understand its significance. The story of the Ayrshire Yeomanry continues today in the Scottish and North Irish Yeomanry, serving alongside their comrades in the Lothian and Border Yeomanry, Fife and Forfar Yeomanry, and North Irish Horse Squadrons. Our modern-day reservists have a strong foundation on which to build, and we have every confidence in them.